This is the story of a marriage. Now, those of you who are married may know that marriages go up and down from time to time. And this marriage had been going on for a good long time. This marriage had already been going for about 300 or 400 years. And the marriage was between the Lady Satanya, the ageless beauty, the powerful sorceress, she who had 100 sons, but kept her girlish figure. She who could bake bread so wholesome that a tiny crumb of it could keep a warrior nourished for a whole campaign. She who could weave and embroider leather and beautiful clothing for her whole family. She who could brew honey mead that was so sweet that it warmed even the hardest of hearts. That's the Lady Satanya. And her husband was the great warrior Wozameg, hard of heart, fierce of temper, strong of muscle, a great horseman. And between the two of them, they were the alpha couple. They were the people who looked after the whole village and all the villages around. There was something of the goddess about the Lady Satanya. Now, after, as I say, 300 or 400 years, rumours started insinuating themselves into the gossiping benches, the market squares of some of those villages in the Caucasus. And the rumours went like this. Wozameg, great man in his time, but getting a bit long in the tooth now, don't you think? A little bit past it, a bit dodgy on that last campaign. In my mind, he would not have succeeded had it not been for Lady Satanya conjuring up that ice storm. I know. And he's starting to show his age. She's not showing her age. Well, she wouldn't, would she? No, you see, the Lady Satanya wears the trousers in that family. Well, in the way of all rumours, it finally reached the ears of Wozameg himself, and he was not pleased. Wozameg did have a fiery temper, but this really hurt. The idea that Satanya could be undermining him, sabotaging his power. And he brooded on it for a few days, and he said, there's only one thing to do. She must go. So he went home one day. He went into his tower. He went into the kitchen, and there was the Lady Satanya rolling out the dough, elbow deep in flour, looking at her most beautiful as she made the bread for the whole village. But he was strong. He stuck to his guns. He said, this has got to stop. And she looked up and she said, hello, darling. Would you like a lovely goblet of honey mead? You look a little bit tired. And he said, I'm not tired. And this has got to stop. You have got to stop undermining me. I've made up my mind. I'm implacable. I divorce you. I divorce you. I divorce you. The words were said. He could hardly believe they'd come out of his mouth. But she looked up and she smiled and she said, all right, darling, if that's what you'd like. Are you sure that's really what you want? He said, yes. Aren't you going to argue me out of it? No, darling, I would not dream of arguing you out of anything. You are the Lord and Master. You are the person who wears the trousers in this household, as you know. So you're just going to roll over, are you, and go with it? And she said, of course, oh, absolutely, I will go. I'll go back to my people. You will be rid of me. And in the silence, Wozameg sighed, and he looked down at his boots that had been beautifully and intricately embroidered by the Lady Satanya, with scenes of battles, scenes of feasting. And then she said, but I do ask one thing. She said, if I'm going to go, she said, I think it's only right that we have 7 days of feasting to say goodbye to me, because I have done a lot for your people. And he said, yes, absolutely. And he raised his eyes, and there was a line of copper pots, beautifully burnished by the Lady Satanya. And he remembered all the feasts that he'd had coming out of that. And he said, look, he said, we'll have your feast. You'll have your proper send-off, he said, but you have done a lot for all of us, he said. remembering all the bread, remembering all the honeymoon, remembering the love-making. There was nobody like the Lady Satanya. He said, "I'll tell you what, when you leave, you can take whatever you like, whatever is closest to your heart, whatever you love the most, whatever treasures you want, you take it with you." And she said, "Done, I will do that." And so invitations were sent out to everybody, all the families, all the 100 sons and their families. And the time came for the 7 days feasting. And if you have never been to a feast in the Caucasus, you have no idea what you've missed. You needed 7 days to get through all the food. You needed 7 days to drink all the formal toasts that were required. And on the 7th day, Wozemeg was to be found sitting on his own, looking in a depressed way at his beautifully embroidered boots. And the Lady Satanya, she saw him and she said to some of her sons, she said, "You're not doing your duty. You go over to your father. You offer him more to drink. He's looking depressed. He should be enjoying himself. This is a feast." And so the sons went over and they sat on either side of Wozemeg and they elbowed him in the ribs and they said, "Come on, Dad." They said, "Have another drink. Let's toast all the good times." And Wozemeg drank, and he drank again, and the sons gave him more and more to drink, and finally he fell over in a stupor, unconscious. And as soon as she saw that, the Lady Satanya prepared her ox cart, her 2 beautiful oxes with the curling horns, and she packed what she loved the most, all the things that were dearest to her, into that ox cart, and at night she cracked the whip and off she set back to her people. Wozemeg woke to the horrible sensation that he was on board a foul-smelling boat, and he hated the sea. He had little hammers going in his head. He realized he had the worst hangover that he'd had for many a long decade. There was a taste in his mouth like the inside of a giant's cave that hadn't been properly cleaned out all winter. And as he lay there in torment and pain, wondering how the heck he came to be on a boat, he felt a cool breeze on his face, and he opened one eye, and there was the moon-faced beauty of his wife, the Lady Satanya, and she was waving a burdock leaf over his face, cooling him down. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I thought you'd left me. You've left me." And she said, "Well, yes, I have left you. I'm on my way home now to my people. I've left you all right." And he said, "Well, I don't get it. Well, I don't understand. Why, where are we?" And she said, "Well, my darling," she said, "you did say I was to take whatever was closest to my heart. You said, take the things I love the most. And it's you, my darling husband. I brought you with me. We're both leaving. We're both going to my parents." And Wozemeg, first of all, his side of his mouth twitched, and then he smiled, and then he laughed, his belly laugh, and he said, "You win, my darling. You win. You will never leave me. I will never leave you. We are matched." And they drove back home. And as far as I know, Wozemeg and Satanya are still married, somewhere in the middle of the Caucasus, somewhere in those jagged teeth, those white teeth that reach up into the blue, blue sky way over there in the Caucasus.